welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 88 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 14 of A Clash of Kings, that's Arya 4.
And here's the plan. We're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out our show notes. They'll provide you some additional information, which will be particularly convenient if you are not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing well. How about you, sir?
We've basically had a year of recording remotely, yeah?
Yes, you're right. I guess it was sometime in late March.
Oh, it was in March, wasn't it? Yeah, I guess. So,
still,
we're in April now.
Right around this time.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy times.
So my dad was here for the past week.
Oh, yeah.
He came down to
Have
visit.
fun.
And it was a nice time. And he left this morning. And so he likes to sit out on the back deck because he is not aware of the pollen situation we have down here this time of year. So he was totally oblivious to the fact that he was just like sitting in pollen. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I was out there with him this morning because he was getting ready to leave, and I happened to be eating a bowl of cereal. And I was wearing like black nylon like athletic pants, you know. And I was sitting there eating my bowl of cereal, talking to my dad, and I looked down, and I thought I had spilled milk on my right knee, and then I cleaned it off with my finger and realized, oh, that's not milk. That's bird crap.
Oh, no. It's supposed to bring you good luck, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I need it. So apparently a bird crapped on my leg, and then I looked on my shoulder, and there was more on my shoulder. And then in between my right knee, and my left shoulder was my bowl of cereal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm staring at that milk in the cereal bowl going, no. I'm no longer interested in you.
Yes, I think I'll eat anything, but even I might turn my nose up at 50-50 chance of bird poop.
It was in a direct line from my knee to my shoulder. Cereal bowl was right in the middle, so... Yeah. And while we were out there, we were talking about the podcast, and he's not listened to before, so I showed him how to access it I put it on his Apple Podcast thing. Of course, gave us a 5-star rating while I was in there.
Well done. We'll read that out later.
Yeah. And I showed him how the episodes start at the very bottom from the earliest and work their way up. And so I played a little bit of the prologue from A Game of Thrones, our first episode. And I'm like, whew, were we stale? You're like, hello, my name is Simon McGrother, and I'm Mackelly Ray. Yeah,
So I don't have much. I got a couple of funny things from my weekly family call. I told you before, my weekly family call, we all take turns describing our week. And of course, everybody's life is kind of prescribed and boring at the moment. So it's kind of like, my sister could come up with this week was that she'd audited her freezer. And had made a spreadsheet of what was in her freezer.
Wow.
But I've said before, every time people do this, at the end of the call, they come up with something much better. She rescued a baby fox this week. I'm like, what? Where was that? Right. While we were having this conversation?
Talking about your freezer spreadsheets. I want to hear about the fox.
My brother, the week before, he got interviewed by a television company. And he forgot to mention that. I'm like, is your life that exciting that doesn't crop up as a thing to talk about?
I know. Mine's so boring. Bird crap on my knee comes up in the story.
The thing that this will make you laugh. So it's my siblings and my mother and my niece who's 14.
Yeah.
And I was describing something which I don't need to put on the podcast, but it was something that I was disappointed about, and I'm disappointed about it because I'm very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do know what you're referring to. Yes.
I said that The 95% of me that is just an ordinary human being is totally fine, no problems at all. But the 5% of me that is super competitive is really irked about this. And my 14-year-old niece, who I've met a handful of times in my life, said 5%. I had to admire. I was like, oh, she's got me pegged. Just these weekly calls. That's all she needed.
She's been paying attention, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so yes, I know what you're referring to, and I think from my perspective, it is not something that you should be worked up about.
Yeah, I know. It's nothing that anyone in the right mind should be worked up about. But the 5% of me that's super competitive is not in the right mind. He's a lunatic.
5 to 10%, possibly.
5 to 80.
Right.
All right, let's get down to business. Yes. Come on. How did we leave Arya Stark? Last time we saw Arya, she was peeing in the woods, frankly. She had a run-in with a pack of wolves. She confided some of her backstory to Yoren, who assured her that the only wolves that were worth fearing were the humankind. Why don't we give them the summary?
All right. Hey, I just noticed you can't see, but do you see what shirt I'm wearing?
I did notice. Oh, okay. I noticed it mid-anecdote. I almost choked. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I just realized I see myself in the little thing there, and I was like, oh, I know what shirt I'm wearing here. Anyway, awesome. I'm wearing my Ghost of Harrenhal sigil shirt, so it means we are destined to have a especially good episode. We're going to go with that. Okay, summary incoming. Arya and Yoren's crew are at an impasse. They've reached a river running south of They've reached a river running south from the God's Eye that appears uncrossable. He doesn't want to backtrack to the King's Road. He believes there's a holdfast where the river meets, or technically leaves, the lake. So they head north up the river's west bank. Yoren, hopes to hire boats to go across the north end of the lake and on to Harrenhal, where Lady Whent is a friend to the Night's Watch.
Hot Pie annoys Yoren by mentioning that Harrenhal is haunted. Arya remembers hearing the stories from Old Nan, King Harren and Balerion the Black Dread. But Arya's tougher than the little girl scared of Old Nan's stories, and let's be honest, she's tougher than Hot Pie too, and she envisions revealing her true identity to Lady Whent and a return to her former life. The road is decent and they make good time, arriving at the town before nightfall. The place is utterly abandoned, but there is no sign of battle.
Arya and company are dispatched to explore the shoreline and look for boats. Nothing usable has been left behind, unfortunately. The lake is an impressive sight with no view of the far shore. Gendry suggests building a raft, and Yoren ponders this. He'd have to lose the wagons, not a bad idea, but he decides to sleep on it. Lamy and Hot Pie think the inn, but Yoren decides the holdfast is the better option, thinking that the 10-foot stone walls and all are a better bet. Arya is spooked and thinks that they should go somewhere else. Lamy says she's scared. She says that whoever abandoned the town was, but Yoren tries to reassure her.
They explore the holdfast and find a postern door to the north, but also a tunnel that runs from the stable all the way out to the lake. Yoren rolls a wagon on top of the trapdoor to ensure no rude surprises. They cook a goose and chicken for dinner, and afterwards she sharpens needle while unable to sleep. The crying girl is an ongoing backing track. Hot Pie tries conversation, but Arya cuts him off. Later still, she awakens to the sound of a wolf. She rouses the others, who all think she's losing it, but a moment later the sounds of the warning horn wake everybody up. She runs past Jaqen H'ghar, who offers to help in the Red War to come. She ignores him.
A large mounted force rides into town, burning as they go. Well, the force wasn't burning. They were burning things as they go. Arya cannot estimate their number better than somewhere between 100 and 200, and Arya's on the catwalk below the battlements when something clutches her leg. She looks down, turns out to be the crying girl, and she shoos her away. The invaders demand that Yoren open the gates. He refuses, again citing the Night's Watch neutrality. There's some verbal jousting that ends with a spear that takes one of the recruits in the throat. The invaders start to scale the walls. Arya is able to repel the first two men, and Hot Pie sends a third falling back.
Arya continues to knock climbers back, and Kos, one of the other recruits, uses bow and arrow to good effect to protect the gate. Yoren kills a fierce-looking guy, and it feels like the boys might just edge things. A thin man broaches the wall, and Gendry's sword breaks on his helm. Arya kills the man, screaming, "Winterfell!" Slightly odd for a flea-bottom urchin to be shouting.
Right.
A hot pie joins in the killing with a yell of "Hot pie!" Actually, that's a more reasonable thing to shout, to be honest. His legend begins.
Right.
Gendry takes the dead man's sword and then jumps down into the keep where invaders have appeared. Arya drops down with him and meets Yoren, who tells her to run.
So she, Gendry, Hot Pie, and an injured Lommy, and the crying girl, race for the tunnel in the barn. Unfortunately, the barn is aflame. Within, the animals are going berserk in understandable fear, as are Rorg Biter and Jaqen H'ghar. Eventually, Gendry carries the girl to the tunnel, the crying girl that is. They get to the tunnel mouth, but Arya is held by Jaqen H'ghar's pleas. She runs back out to grab an axe.
She sees Cos yield to the Lannister men and get killed for his troubles. She grabs the axe, but in turn is grabbed by a mailed hand. She swings the axe upwards and finds a vulnerable spot, her second kill. She runs back into the barn. The scene is awful. She throws the axe into the chained men's wagon and leaps down the tunnel to the sound of Biter axing for his life, followed by a monstrous crash.
Ooh, that chapter was no fun.
No. But it was eventful, I'll give it that.
It was. It was, first of all, I was dreading getting to this chapter, much like I was getting to Ned 14 in of Game of Thrones, which is the one where Cersei and Littlefinger spring their trap on Ned and take him captive. It's just tough to see this ragtag group of outcasts that had come together so well to form a nice little group be kind of obliterated here. In really,
yeah, there's not many of them left.
Yeah.
So we think that 5 are escaping. Gendry, Arya, Hot Pie, Lommy, and the crying girl.
Yeah, and is a little bit unsure about Lommy because we know when they found him, he was bleeding with a spear wound to his calf. But then when Arya is trying to drag the little girl, Hot Pie comes out and says, "Hurry up, Lommy's gone." And it's unclear whether that means Lommy's dead or Lommy has already gone down the tunnel or what. So we'll have to see whether or not Lommy survives.
Plus, if he's injured in the calf, he might be able to crawl through the tunnel. But once they get out of the tunnel, he might not be quite so much used to them.
Sure. Yes, that could be also.
Just before we get to the horrors, the lake was very placid and peaceful. Sort of a nice counterpoint to the war they were about to see.
Yeah.
The description of the lake actually reminded me of the first place I lived in the United States was upstate New York, and upstate New York is bordered to the north by Lake Ontario.
Uh-huh.
And I had a friend from the UK come to visit, and we decided to go and see Niagara Falls. And so we drove, and he was doing the map reading. This is sort of pre-internet days, pre-cell phone days.
Right. He
was doing the map reading, and about halfway through the drive, he said, "What the hell is that body of water?" I was like, "Oh, it's Lake Ontario." So basically, the drive was taking sufficiently long that he'd got a sense of the scale of the map, and he was absolutely amazed by the size of Lake Ontario. He could not believe it.
Maybe he thought you had accidentally driven to the Atlantic coast, and he was like, "You've driven in the wrong direction."
That's what he thought we were heading towards. He was like, I mean, to British people, they are really incredibly large lakes. I mean,
yes, right.
The biggest lake in England you can see end to end.
Yeah,
no problem.
The Great Lakes are rather great in size, and Ontario is one of the smaller of the lakes. So
yeah, it's not big by Great Lake standards, right. But boy.
But yeah, I noticed some of the contrast in some of the things in this chapter as well. Like we started with a very peaceful scene with the blue-green ribbon of the river against the morning sun, and there was a water snake with ripples of water coming as it slithered across the water, and a hawk soaring overhead. And then we end with literally the last words are like death, destruction, tears, and the smell of hell. So it was quite the contrast. But aside from just the contrast of beautiful things versus terrible war. There's also the contrast of Arya thinking that, when they got to Harrenhal and she would reveal herself to Lady Whent, there weren't going to be ghosts there, which I dispute. There are plenty of good ghosts in Harrenhal. Because Hot Pie thinks there's going to be ghosts, and when they get there, she thinks, no, there won't be ghosts, there'll be knights, and knights will keep us safe because they especially keep women safe. And then, the reality of that is we meet a knight, at least one knight here, in Sir Amory Lorch, and he is just a despicable, terrible human being. And
we didn't mention his name in the summary, did we? That's who's leading the band of the men who attack the holdfast are led by Sir Amory Lorch.
Yeah. And I kind of thought that comment from Arya was a little bit Sansa-like. It wasn't a comment, it was a thought. But that thought that, these knights their jobs are to keep them safe and especially keep women safe, felt a little bit Sansa-like, like a little bit unrealistically romanticizing the heroicism and the gallantry of knights. And I thought, I guess she wasn't dissuaded of that opinion by Sir Meryn Trant when he burst in on her and Syrio Forel and ended up killing what we assume was killing Syrio.
Oh, Arya, you mean? Yeah, yes. But I think you have to think of Arya's current plight. Any castle with knights who are on your side would feel like a very comforting thought right now.
Yeah, right. Compared to the vulnerability and danger that they've been in, at least since the Ivy Inn. I could see that.
I think Arya's got a more cool, calculating mind than Sansa.
I agree.
But
yes,
in this case, I do take the point you're making, but I'll give her a pass just because of what she's facing right this second.
Yeah.
It's not a bad plan at all to sail across the God's Eye. It seems like that's a smart thing to do. The problem is, of course, is that they don't know that the Lannisters have made Harrenhal, which is at the top end, their headquarters. So even if they do sail across successfully, they're going to be going straight into the heart of the lion's den, if you will. See what I did there? But actually, I still think it's a better outcome for them than what they're currently facing. Because as they slowly walk around the God's Eye, they're always in danger of bumping into one of these raiding forces who are brutal and awful. If they walk straight into the Lannisters' main camp, they are less likely to just bump into the lawless, murderous, and entirely unconstrained types.
Yes.
They might still be taken prisoner, but at least it won't be.
Yeah, if Tywin is still in Harrenhal, if they were to reach Harrenhal and Tywin physically was still in Harrenhal, they might survive unmolested. Because one thing we know about Tywin is he likes to keep his hands clean and have his dogs, such as Clegane, do the dirty work for him. So, maybe if he's physically there and he doesn't want to dishonor his house by murdering Night's Watch member and his recruits, maybe he would honor the vow and allow them to keep going. Yeah.
The tricky part, of course, is Gendry, because presumably word has reached Harrenhal from King's Landing that they're after one of the recruits in this group. That's the problem.
I hadn't thought about that. Maybe.
That's the bit that's going to trip them up if they do get to Harrenhal, potentially.
Yeah. Yes, right. Hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Based on the descriptions we've heard from folks like Ned, who both know Robert and Gendry, he has quite the resemblance to his father. So, yeah, that could be an issue.
Right. Of course, the one interesting thing about that is, do the gold cloaks who've been sent to get him know why they're going to get him?
Right.
If you remember, they didn't say, we're looking for a kid who looks like Robert Baratheon. They said, we're looking for a armorer's apprentice who has a bull's helmet.
Yes, good point. A raven might have gotten to Tywin from Cersei's explaining why they're looking for him. Of course.
But then again, she might keep that from him. Because again, it's the kind of thing that Tywin wouldn't actually approve of. He wouldn't disapprove of it.
Right.
But he'd be like, why are you wasting time and resources on killing kids who have no bearing on the fate of the world.
I was just going to say that. Yep. Yeah. Now, of course, if they get to Harrenhal and Tywin isn't there, if he's gone off, we know that the plan is to try and draw him out of Harrenhal. So if he's either marching toward Robb's forces or toward Renly's forces at this point, that could be even worse for the group, possibly, because they'd be marching right into who knows what. So maybe.
But again, I'd rather meet Tywin on the march than his outriders of lunacy.
Yeah, I mean, if they make it to Harrenhal and they don't get to Tywin at all, and whoever is manning Harrenhal, whether it's Gregor Clegane or whomever, could be bad, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't care.
The thing is, if it's a minor lord of some sort, he probably knows the deal with the Night's Watch, and will say, "All right, on your way."
Possibly.
We can't give you any resources because we don't have enough to share, but
Yeah, I guess it depends on who he might leave in charge. Maybe he would leave Kevin in charge of Harrenhal, which in which case you might be all right. So
yeah.
But I was wondering if there's the possibility of them taking refuge in the Isle of Faces, which is the island at the center of the God's Eye, which is why it's called the God's Eye, because it kind of looks like an eye. Now we've talked about the Isle of Faces in the past. It's really the only place in the south of the Neck where there is a large group of werewoods with faces carved in, and the green men keep watch over the Isle of Faces. It's a pretty sacred island, so possibly Arya being a Stark and therefore a worshipper of the old gods, maybe they would be granted refuge there for a while.
Yeah. Of course, it's a dead end.
Yes.
In the sense that it's not getting her any closer to home. But you could wait for the worst of this to blow over before you make the rest of the journey. That's true.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know what the eating is like on the Isle of Faces.
Yes.
They might have some lakeside restaurants that you can dine in. I do feel for Yoren. Ever since the encounter with the Gold Cloaks who were looking for Gendry, he's been trying to find a way to avoid this mess. But he's been railroaded basically by geography into this holdfast. This was kind of like a video game on rails. You were always going to end up in this holdfast, and really there was no saving them then.
Pretty much, yep. Yeah. I mean, when we got to this chapter, I felt like he just wasn't able to adjust enough to how the war has altered things in the Riverlands. Sometimes he did some adjustments, like he going off the King's Road and around the House Myatt troops that they came across that were up ahead. But basically 30 years of conditioning just kept him coming back to thinking that things were going to be the way they usually were, and in the end it ultimately cost him. Like, for instance, he expected this town to be populated and functioning as it was before. He was expecting the Lord to be there and there'd be boats and coming and going, and that obviously didn't happen. And even though Arya suggested, no, we shouldn't stay in this town because they left for a reason, this is kind of a magnet for someone who's wanting to pillage and cause chaos, but he thought, no, we'll stay here in the holdfast. And then he also assumed that Lady Whent was still in Harrenhal and thought that would be a safe place for them. Again, we know she's not there anymore, and it may or may not be safe for them. So, but I agree. It seems likely they were not going to make it through the Riverlands unscathed. It's just too war-torn. And, pretty much anything they did, they weren't, when they decided not to take the boat, when they decided not to take a ship, they were pretty much starting down the path that was going to lead to some sort of situation like this.
Yeah, so really their best hope was to get to Harrenhal and surrender to Tywin and let him take the best of the men and all of the goods, and let the rest of them carry on north.
That was definitely, if they got there and were left to his mercy, he might have let them keep going, but he also very well was going to take all the things that Yoren's been dragging in those wagons for so long, and very possibly any capable men. So yes, I agree entirely.
So Gendry suggests that they could raft across the lake. He thinks they could build a raft and then use a pole to push themselves along, which is fine, but they'd have to stick to the shoreline, and you'd imagine they're going to run into more trouble sticking to the shoreline. Paddling across the middle on a non-hydrodynamic raft would be hard work, I would imagine.
Yes, especially as big as this lake is.
Yes.
They might need to stop at the Isle of Faces just to rest their arms for a bit.
Yeah. So Old Nan's stories of Harrenhal, she says that people still go to sleep in Harrenhal and wake up burnt to death. Arya is a bit skeptical of Old Nan's stories, and I think she's probably correct in this case.
Yeah, and then Hot Pie has the line of the series so far when he says, "There's ghosts in Harrenhal." I thought, there's damn right they are.
Yeah.
So when they first get to the town and realize it's empty, Arya thinks to herself that she's as frightened by this empty town as she was by the burned holdfast that they came across in the previous chapter, where they found the one-armed woman and the little crying girl. And what her fear is basically that it's empty. Like, what scared these people so much that they entirely, to a person, abandoned this town? And so it's basically the fear of the unknown that she is so afraid of. What were they so afraid of that I should be so afraid of?
Yeah, but I mean, she's also just right purely logistically. A burned town, Amory Lorch is not coming back there to burn it.
Right, yeah.
An abandoned town, they ran before these men arrived, so these men are still coming.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, if this had been burned out, they could assume, well, it's actually pretty safe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just how much is Amory Lorch phoning it in if he keeps going back and burning the same village over and over?
Right. Yeah, he'd definitely be hitting his torch quota, but
yeah.
Depends on...
Be funny if Tywin had like a sliding scale of payment. You know?
How many torches did you use this month? But so one thing they discover is that they were sent. Arya and some of the other members of this group were sent to look for boats, and unfortunately, they discover there to be no boats. And she thinks they've taken all the boats. And at first, I thought, what an odd thing to do. Why would you take all the boats when you fled? But then the more I thought about it, there's no major road running in and out of this town. So
exactly.
The river is likely how they escaped from this town.
So you think they were trekking across country carrying these boats?
Exactly. I thought, why would they take the boats? What are they going to do with the boats on the King's Road?
They've gone to the delightful waterfront cafes on the Isle of Faces. That's where they're hanging out until the war's over.
I propose this as a possibility. Might they have fled to, they might have some sort of relationship with the green men on the Isle of Faces. Maybe they provide them with food.
The Isle of Faces is kind of near the north end of the God's Eye, though, so they're pretty far away from that. I mean, maybe some of the local towns do, but I would think this town is about as far away as you can get.
Possibly, yeah. But of course, if they did escape to the Isle of Faces, the Lannisters might not bother to, I don't know that they're going to go across. It's a sacred island, that they might not have enough ships to be going across the lake.
So Amory Lorch is thinking, if we just stay on horse, I can do 3 towns in one night, no problem. If I have to get on boats and go over there, it's going to be one burning. Right. Tywin's not going to go for that.
Yeah. So this river flows from the God's Eye into the Blackwater Rush and then right into King's Landing. So it's possible that they might have used...
Right, and we know that a lot of refugees were headed that way, so it does make sense maybe that they went south down the river instead.
Right, yeah.
So Yoren makes a fairly sensible reassurance to the crew about the safety of the town for them. The people who ran away from the town were at war, but the Night's Watch isn't. And he says, we have no enemies. But Arya thinks to herself, yeah, but we also have no friends either.
Yep.
And that's been the problem here.
Yeah, what he's saying is true by the literal sense of the law, but he's dealing with just people who've been sent out to cause chaos and destruction. So he is, again, assuming that life is like it has been for the past 30 years. And that's a lot of stock to be putting into this one letter of the law rule that, they're not involved in these wars or skirmishes. So
Arya struggles to sleep and then sleeps. And in her dream, she hears a wolf howling and it wakes her up.
And I wondered if that maybe was some sort of connection to Nymeria, like Bran, how Bran, when he physically goes into summer in his dreams. But I wondered if maybe this was some type of Arya Nymeria connection going on here, and that Nymeria was maybe trying to warn her to wake up because there's danger. So,
yeah. And that it came to her in her dream is interesting too, because if you heard a wolf howling, you might not think anything of it. There are wolves howling,
right.
It's nighttime. But she dreamt it and she saw it as a warning, so she tried to wake everybody up. Of course, nobody believed her.
Right.
Until the lookouts noticed the same thing that she'd already intuited.
Right. The wolf's howl didn't really do anything useful because Kassa's horn, or whoever it was that blew the horn, did basically the same thing. But, maybe if this was some sort of connection, Nymeria was trying to tell her there's danger, get out. But when I first read this chapter way back when, I had hoped and thought that maybe they were going to be saved by a large pack of wolves, because we've heard from the innkeeper at the Ivy Inn that there's large packs of wolves around the God's Eye, and I was hoping that maybe that's what was about to happen here, but no, there was no eagles saving them a la Lord of the Rings. So,
but hopefully, I mean, we do feel like Arya and Nymeria are reattaching to a certain extent, so maybe a tearful reunion is on the cards.
Right. Yeah. They've been kind of setting up this wolf thing. We've been hearing about the wolves, and then we saw the pack of wolves last chapter. Now she's dreaming of a wolf howling, so maybe they are, maybe they're going to set us up for a reunion. Yeah.
So as she scrambles to get ready, she runs past the wagon with the prisoners, and Jaqen H'ghar says, "Is it war? Red war?" And you had something you wanted to say about this, which I'm going to not agree with. Just
okay.
Prepare yourself.
Well, this phrase I caught it the first time I read the chapter, and then it kept sticking out to me every time I read the chapter subsequently this week. And I just thought, what an odd phrase to say. Is it war, red war? What does that even mean? So, like the most red thing, aside from the Lannisters' sigil, which is red and gold, the most red associated thing that we have so far in this story is R'hllor, the red god, which is what he's often referred to in Westeros. So we'll just have to see. Right now, we know that Jaqen H'ghar is from Lorath, and on Lorath they traditionally worship the blind god Boash. That doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't worship R'hllor. We know Selyse Baratheon is from Westeros, and she worships R'hllor, so just have to see. It's just something that stuck out as me. I was like, what does that even mean? Why is he saying red war?
I got two things for you. One is bleedingly obvious. One of the things that happens in war is people bleed blood. And blood is red. Yes, not the god R'hllor, not the Lannisters' gold scarlet cloaks, but the blood that's about to be shed. Okay, that was the obvious one. Slightly less obvious, he's a foreigner, and he doesn't speak the common tongue perfectly well. So this might just be a affectation, not affectation, but a consequence of his limited common tongue.
You always have the obvious.
I'm sorry. But that was less obvious, the second one.
Yes. So then Amory Lorch and his men arrive, and they start burning the village, which is empty. So at first you think, well, what a waste. Why would you randomly waste your time and effort burning a village that is completely empty? But if you recall back to previous Tyrion chapters, Tywin wanted them to deliberately lay waste to the Riverlands. So that would explain why they're randomly laying waste to an empty village. And then, as we mentioned in the summary, Arya estimates that there's 100 to 200 soldiers out there. But we know from Tyrion 9 that Tywin gave Clegane, Vargo Hoat, and Amory Lorch 300 cavalry each to do this task of creating chaos and destruction. So her number, it could be right. I mean, we don't know if his entire force came to do this, or it could even be low. There could be 300 men out there.
So Lorch accuses Yoren's crew of being in league with Beric Dondarrion, which is, again, Beric Dondarrion just continues to just fight the good fight. I mean, he was sent into this fight by Ned Stark before any of this trouble began to get Gregor Clegane, and he's still bugging them. Yes. I mean, it feels like his reputation is just outsized compared to what he must be capable of doing.
Right. Even if they're successful, they've got to be losing men here and there. They can't have had that many men that they could still be doing a great deal of damage.
We don't know if he's truly earning it. I mean, Lorch's crew accused Yoren's motley crew of being in league with Dondarrion. So it's easy to see how he might gain an undeserved reputation for being everywhere. Lorch could come back from this and say, yeah, we found Dondarrion's team and we smoked him out. We smoked him out, I tell you.
Yeah, it's like every group they see, they're attributing to being part of Beric and company.
And I think we've heard mentioned before that they've had several rumours that they were all dead.
Yes.
And for them to come back again. So maybe it's this. Maybe it's just the people just assume everyone they're fighting is Beric Dondarrion.
Right. Very much could be the case.
So as the sort of argument between Yoren and Amory Lorch goes on, Gendry is the first to notice that Amory Lorch doesn't care about the answers that he's getting. I mean, he says, open the doors and then we'll know that you're loyal to the king.
Right.
And Yoren tries to show his sigil, which is all black, of course, for the Night's Watch, and they say, "Oh, that looks like Beric Dondarrion's purple with lightning on it." He's like, "Okay, I'm not sure about that." But Gendry is the one who sort of like looks at him and he says, "He just wants to fight us. He doesn't care. He doesn't care." He's not telling Yoren this. He's telling Arya, and Arya then uses her looking, really seeing like
Syrio taught her.
Syrio taught her, and she notices, that's exactly what's going on in Lorch's eyes.
Yeah, it seemed like it was just like a weak effort to give an option, like let us in and we'll let you go, so that when this offer was rejected, it would give them a pseudo legit reason to attack this group. If they rejected what they were saying was King Joffrey's command, then they could say, well, we gave them a chance. They wouldn't open their gates, so we had to kill them all. But Lorch says, when Yoren eventually says, no, I'm not going to let you in, he says, I've got young boys in here. And Lorch says that old men and boys die the same. And coming from Amory Lorch, this has a little bit of a little bit more significance to it, because Amory Lorch is the same person that with Gregor Clegane went into the Red Keep and killed young Aegon and young Rhaenys, the children of Rhaegar Targaryen. So he is not opposed to killing children, helpless children. So
good point.
And we know that House Lorch is just a house of landed knights. So he wasn't chosen because of the prestige of House Lorch. He was chosen for his ruthless nature and the fact that he will follow through on commands such as it's okay to kill children. So
right. Yeah, so I mean, you can do the what if of Yoren could have opened the door, but I think it's clear that this was not going to end well. And there was a chance here. I mean, there was even if it's 300 men against 30, the 10-foot walls give you a chance.
Right.
If the 30 knew what they were doing, that would have helped, but they're really hopeless.
Yes. Except for I was actually good. This isn't pedantry, but I was it was pedantry only in the fact that who the heck built this holdfast that they built basically like stairs. The walls are basically like stairs. These people are climbing these things like nobody's business.
but at the same time, I mean, it'd be expensive to mortar those 10-foot walls. It'd be hard work.
It would.
And 10-foot walls, that's not nothing. Even if they're easy to climb, you can stand on those battlements and you can chop down anyone who comes up.
If you've got enough people, I guess. But these men were climbing these walls like nothing. It was like they were made of ladder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, him saying old men and boys die the same, knowing what we know about his history with little baby Rainies, the directive from Tywin to cause just death and destruction, all point to bad things happening here, even if he would have let them in.
I am not going to refer to him as the misunderstood, let me tell you. He is perfectly understood.
Yeah.
So,
but they were heavily outnumbered here. I mean, possibly 300 to 30. And it's hard to hold against those odds, even with this holdfast. And especially when many of your members are kids. So
yeah, but I reckon 30 trained, armed knights could hold it against 300. Because it's so dangerous to climb a wall. You know,
you're very vulnerable. That's for
what's
sure.
Going to come in from above, right?
Yeah.
So the fight goes on, and Arya basically kills two guys. She chops some fingers of people who try to climb over the wall, and she pushes people back off the wall. Well, actually, one of them, she just waves needle at him, and he falls back off the wall. But probably that wouldn't kill them. So she definitely kills one guy along with Hot Pie, and she probably kills the guy that she hit with the axe as well.
Right.
But she feels sorry for the guy that she's killing with Hot Pie, which I think is an interesting observation. She feels bad that she's doing it. It's
while she's doing somewhat. It. Right. Yeah.
She is a 9-year-old child. I mean, it's got to be traumatic to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm 50 years old, and I couldn't butcher a rabbit, you know.
Me either. Yep.
If I was asked to, it would traumatize me for the rest of my life. So
yeah. Yeah, I picked up on that as well, that she still has the capacity to help those in need, even after all that she's been through and what she's currently dealing with. The scene that's painted in this chapter is just pretty horrific. I mean, the whole place is on fire. There's people dying left and right. There's animals dying. It's really terrible situation. And, you know, she insists that Gendry save the little crying girl, and you get the little crying girl to the tunnel and take her out, while Arya goes back out of the barn and gets the axe to bring it back to save these three criminals who really she only has a relationship with. Jaqen H'ghar, the other two are pretty terrible to her, and but she couldn't let them just burn to death in there. So,
just in passing, I'll say that it isn't her first kill, of course, because she did kill the stable boy in King's Landing, and countless pigeons, of course. But the stable boy was barely more than an accident, and here she was actually using some of her Syrio-Forel training to fight. She's also very dismayed for the animals, and I was affected by that too. The horses and donkeys are just so vulnerable to that combination of confinement and fire.
Yeah, that was tough.
Their screams would be pretty disturbing.
Yeah, this tough chapter just in general. I mean, there was so much stress, so much to upset you about it. You know, watching the final culmination of where these folks were headed, watching them finally get what we felt like they were heading toward, and the animals dying, and you know, it was a rough chapter.
Yeah. You got some background for us?
I do. Now, those of you who are hoping that I might be able to solve the mystery of who the person was with the wasp sigil that killed Kyle, unfortunately, I was not able to solve that riddle.
That was probably only me, because we didn't actually mention the wasp sigil earlier.
We did.
But there's a wasp sigil amongst the 300 men here, right?
Yes, and the person with the wasp sigil was killing Kyle. That was the reference to it. And unfortunately, that sigil has never been announced who it is, to my knowledge. Now, I did do some reading through some Reddit stuff, and I found a person who suggested that it might be either House Clifton or House Kendall. Both are from the Westerlands, so it would fit. The person was leading toward House Clifton. I have absolutely no clue if that's right or not, but neither of those houses have had their sigils revealed either, so could be one of those two. Anyway.
That's reasonable.
So I thought we would talk about another battle that took place here. There's been several famous battles that have taken place here around the God's Eye. And in this one, much like now, House Lannister found itself supporting a different Iron Throne contender than House Stark. This was during the Dance of the Dragons. House Lannister supported Aegon II in the Greens, while House Stark and many of the Riverlords supported Rhaenyra Targaryen and the Blacks. So a Western army, originally led by Lord Jaqen Lannister, marched eastward in support of Aegon II. Now, Jaqen Lannister was killed in a battle on their march to this point here, and as the Western army arrived at the God's Eye, their new leader, Lord Humphrey Lefford, found an opposing army of Black supporters waiting for them along the lake's western shore. Lord Roderick Dustin of the North and his Winter Wolves, along with Forrest Frey and Robb Rivers, both of the Riverlands, sat in wait with their armies, while other armies supporting the Blacks approached from the south. Lord Lefford and the Westernmen tried unsuccessfully to reach Harrenhal by Raven to seek assistance from Prince Aemon Targaryen. Lord Dustin and his Winter Wolves led the attack on the Western army. Attacked by the Blacks from three sides, the Lannister soldiers had no place to go but into the God's Eye itself, and hundreds died between fighting and drowning. The battle was known as the Battle by the Lakeshore, and was the bloodiest war of the Dance of the Dragons, with 2,000 soldiers killed. And due to the high number of casualties and the fact that it was in a lake, it also became known as the Fish Feed. 2/3 of the northern soldiers were killed or wounded, and the battle spawned subsequent battles around and above the God's Eye, including one right here on the southern shore of the God's Eye. But to tell that story, you first needed to know this battle, so we'll talk about those battles in future episodes.
Okay, great. So comparison with the television show. I've got an unusually long comparison with the television show today. The whole preamble of finding the abandoned village and holdfast is dropped. Instead, we get a funny scene in which Gendry mentions that he knows that Arya is a girl.
Oh.
She confesses who she is, and he mocks her then by calling her your ladyship. She asks why the gold cloaks are after him. Because basically she's now confessed of why she thought the gold cloaks were after her.
Right, yeah.
He tells of the visits from Jon Arryn and Ned Stark. So when this actual scene starts, we cut to the recruits sleeping within. Arya is sharpening needle, and Yoren sits with her for a while. And she asks how he can sleep with the horrible things that he's seen in his head. She confesses to seeing the scene at Baelor Sept in her head every time she closes her eyes. He insists she didn't see it. He made sure of that. But unfortunately, she's got enough of the puzzle pieces in place to imagine the last part of it. So,
right.
Yoren confides his own backstory. A guy called Willem murdered his brother when he was just a little bit older than Arya, when Yoren was just a little bit older than Arya. Years went by, and Yoren started to forget his brother's face, but he could always remember Willem's face. He remembered the murderer's face, even as he lost the brother's face.
Sure.
He would think about him all the time, and he would even say his name before he fell asleep. One day, Willem rode into town, and Yoren killed him with an axe, took his horse, and rode straight for the wall. And then he sort of looks at Arya, who's looking at him sort of wide-eyed, and he says, "That'll help you sleep." But in actual fact, you see that it might, sort of like channeling this revenge might be exactly what she wants to do.
Sure.
So the horn sounds at that moment, the battle commences. A couple of interesting differences. Lorch is looking for Gendry. His crew have bumped into the gold cloaks. They've explained what they're doing, and so he's literally there looking for Gendry.
Okay.
So that sort of justifies the battle a lot more.
Yes,
here.
Right, yes.
Yoren tells Arya and Gendry to run before the fight even starts.
Okay.
He's like, get out of here. And in the sort of like panic at the beginning of the fight, Lomi picks up Gendry's bull helmet, which becomes important, because the fight then takes place outside the holdfast, which is rather defeating the object of sleeping within it, if you ask me. But
indeed,
they all run out to fight. Yoren dies very heroically. I mean, we don't know if Yoren died in this book, but he was obviously in a lot of trouble.
Right.
But in the show, he definitely dies. Arya doesn't kill anyone, and basically at the end of the fight, Yoren is dead, Lomi is hurt, and everyone is rounded up and captured by the Lannisters. Lomi is sort of crying that he's injured, and he sort of asks for help from a Lannister, who instead of helping him just runs him through with a sword. Jeez. Lorch then demands Gendry, and Arya says that, oh, you just killed him. And the presence of the bull helmet next to Lomi makes that seem reasonable, you see, makes that seem believable.
Yes.
Although, and she actually says he loved that helmet, but Lomi had blonde hair, so hopefully the accurate description of Gendry did not come up the road.
Yes.
Because he doesn't look anything like Robert Baratheon.
Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah. But you see, that's very interesting now, because now we're definitely going to diverge in the next chapter too, because she's flat out captured here. They're all captured.
Right.
In the book, she's still in the wind. So
yeah.
So I did not find any pedantry. I mean, I spend my week thinking, what can I be pedantic about?
You do indeed, yes.
Not a thing.
Wow.
It was. I mean, apart from the TV show one, if you're going to be in a holdfast, stay in the holdfast to fight.
Right.
Don't walk out of there to fight them.
Yep, that's some solid logic right there.
News and notes?
We got a little bit. Not really much news and notes. There's really no world news to talk about, like nothing with George Martin or Game of Thrones prequels or sequels or anything. But we did get an email from our listener Jenny, who's Jenny of Oldstones on our Discord server. And among many very glowing things she said, she also wondered if we had thought of setting up a coffee payment site where appreciative listeners can buy us a cup of coffee or a sparkling water, or she put 2 inches of car repair for you.
my car is back now.
Oh, good. All right.
It looks good.
Yeah, we're looking into setting up monetary things, but as of right now, still.
Yeah.
We're just having fun still.
We're having fun. Losing money hand over fist.
That's right.
We got a review from Ross, who's a countryman of mine, or original countryman of mine.
Right.
Great podcast. I don't think you could ask for a better companion piece for reading A Song of Ice and Fire, either as a first-time reader, serial rereader, or show watcher. Simon and Mackelly bounce off each other in a way only long-time friends can, as they expertly dissect each chapter, theorise about without spoiling, and reveal informative background information that helps to flesh out GRRM's expertly crafted world. Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Thank you, Ross. That's a great review. Much appreciated. I believe that came from podchaser.com. I didn't put it in there,
thanks.
but I'm pretty sure that's where it came from. And then final bit of humorous news is on our Discord server. There was a funny conversation between two of our listeners where they were discussing a fan fiction scenario where Humphrey Bogart was doing a solo separate investigation of Jon Arryn's murder from Ned Stark. And it was quite humorous. And it started with a discussion of how some houses have a bunch of like mystical sounding names and then one common one thrown in there, like Cersei, Tywin, Tyrion, and Kevin. And the Baratheons, Stannis, and Renly, and Robert.
Yes,
So
that's a good point. Yeah.
It was good stuff. Anyway, if you want to join the Discord server, the link will be on these show notes and in our main website for this show.
All right, let's conclude. So I would say that Amory Lorch can give Gregor Clegane a run for his money for pure evil and nastiness.
Yes, I believe that's the exact disposition he was hired for.
Yep.
For this particular job.
Could Yoren have saved some lives by yielding? What do you think?
I'm so torn by this. If he had said, "Okay, I'll open the doors and let them in," it's possible they might have just taken them captive. I don't know, because they would have had to have seen that these folks are Night's Watch recruits. Yoren looks clearly like a member of the Night's Watch, and the ragtag group could not anyway be mistaken for some type of organized military
And the three
force.
prisoners are the clincher.
Yes.
Yeah, you've got these three guys in a wagon chained up. Why do you have that? Because you're the Night's Watch.
Yes.
Who else would be transporting prisoners around a war zone?
Yes. So it's there's a possibility that it might not have ended in so much death had he let them in. And also, we know, because Arya mentioned it to us, that inside this holdfast there's a haven where the townsfolk go when there's trouble. From the outside, these guys don't know if there's an entire village hiding out in this holdfast in that haven. So Yoren is asking them to take his word for it. There's no townfolk here, it's just us. They don't know if he's lying or not. He says, take my word for it. Maybe if they had let them in, if he had let them in, they had seen that the whole place was empty aside from these 30 ragtag folks here. They might have just taken them hostage or taken all their stuff, burnt the place, and just let them go on their own. I don't know.
You see, maybe the book is aiming for this, but I think the show makes the fight more pressing because in the show, they had no choice. They were looking for Gendry again.
Right.
You couldn't say, nope, not here, we're Night's Watch recruits. That's who we're looking for.
Right. We're just town folk.
See our sigil? It looks a bit like the Night's Watch, but
they're just like drawing on the cape.
If I was Rorge or Biter or Jaqen H'ghar, I'd be like, I'm a Lannister! They've captured me!
Yes. But yeah, this outcome felt pretty inevitable from the moment we got to the Ivy Inn and the innkeep said, you'll be back. There's no going north. And at that point, they were still close enough to the coast they possibly could have turned east and taken a ship. From that point, there was just a matter of time. It wasn't an if, but a when something catastrophic like this was going to happen.
Yeah. Like, Arya acquitted herself pretty well in the battle. I mean, she did what she could.
Yes, right, absolutely.
But presumably, although she may have physically avoided injury, she will be scarred by what she's done.
No doubt. Yeah.
But it does seem that Arya, Gendry, Hot Pie, the Crying Girl, and perhaps Lommy have got out of there.
Yes, that's what we know
Lommy's
so far.
a goner in this TV show, I can tell you that.
Right. Major difference for Lommy here.
Yeah.
But so, what do the kids do now? I mean, if it's just, we don't know who's all survived. We know who made it out of the tunnel. We know who made it into the tunnel, I should say. It's the kids you just mentioned. But what do they do now? They're all alone in a war zone. Do they do they stick to Yoren's plan and make for Harrenhal because they think Lady Whent is going to be there?
I've got to say, if I was them and I wasn't Arya Stark and I didn't know Arya Stark was amongst them, I would head exactly the opposite direction to what we were just doing. You know, I would head south down that river towards King's Landing.
Yeah, start over again.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to the wall anymore, for crying out loud.
Right, yes. That's a very good point. They're not going to the wall anymore.
Right.
It's possible he could have survived this. We don't know yet, but certainly seems like the wall has been almost permanently put on hold.
Right. But Arya needs to go north.
Yes.
But it might be better going south to go north, to be honest. I mean, it's getting pretty fraught in this direction. But we'll find out, I guess. Yeah.
Now, could they cross? Now, obviously, Arya knows who she is, and she knows who her grandfather is, Hoster Tully. She knows they're not that far from River Run. I mean, for a bunch of kids on foot, it's a long distance, but it's the closest thing geographically to safety that they have. Could they possibly cross that river?
That's the teeth of the gale. That is the teeth of the battle they've got to walk through.
Yes, they'd have to cross through the teeth of the battle. But could they could cross that river that they didn't cross earlier because of the wagons and try and head northwest to River Run. It's an option.
Yeah. All right. Let's draw a line under this one. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and the ever-active Discord server.
It is. And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and or fantastic review, we certainly would appreciate it, and we might just read your review on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.